of the People with Rabbi Raphael Shore, director, producer, writer, author, human rights activist. Rabbi, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Let's go.
Let's go. So I want to go to the book cover. So Ericka, let's pull up the book cover because this is really, so to me, this is brilliant. It's taking something that was German propaganda during the war and repurposing the content, as the expression goes these days, into something that is big and beautiful and powerful. So maybe you can explain the cover to everyone, and then I want to show everyone where this came from.
Yeah.
Okay. What we talked about just before the break was I mentioned briefly that Elie Wiesel said the Jewish people are like a messenger who got knocked on the head, and we forgot that what the message was. We even forgot that we're messengers. And this is a very deep idea that I'm trying to help with this book to revive the Jewish people and help them remember that they're messengers. But after 2,000 years of consistent persecution, the Jewish psyche has really been deeply impacted. And it's very difficult for most Jews today. And Israeli Jews are different. They're stronger. But for American Jews and for the average Jewish person in the diaspora to stand up and proudly say, I'm Jewish. I love being Jewish. It's a privilege to be Jewish. It's a wonderful heritage. It's a responsibility, but it's something very special. And that's sad because we have such a heritage. We are a people who've shown such resilience, such goodness. We've made such an impact, and yet we've lost track, and it's difficult for us to be proud. So this book cover is trying to reflect that anti-Semitism is not so much hate as it is fear, that there's actually a fear of Jewish spiritual influence, Jewish power, Jewish success. And we want the Jew to feel very solid in his moral self-confidence is what I like to call it. Ruth Wise calls it that. We want the Jews to have moral self-confidence with who they are. So this image portrays it. Strong Jew, very happy to be Jewish. And the anti-Semites, the Jew haters, with all their contradictions and their double standards and their irrationality underneath small people who are being ridiculous. So you've got Hitler, who's saying stop supporting genocide, as ridiculous as that is. You've got the LGBTQ Hamas supporter, college student down there.
Right. I love that one. Yeah.
Somehow aligning himself with Hamas, even though the gays won't last more than a couple days in Gaza. Nope. And then you've got the Hamas guy who's actually saying, yeah, let's do genocide and kill you all. Right. But those guys are all little pathetic little bothers. They're mosquitoes that should be just bothering us. And anti-Semitism shouldn't bother us. Anti-Semitism should teach us our greatness, like your father said, like that you can tell a person by his enemies. The fact that the Jews persecuted and hated in every generation means we're relevant. The fact that in every generation evil finds the Jew means we're the opposite of evil. It means we're good.
I love that.
That's
I
why
personally love that.
Yeah. So that's what we need to take away. And the irony is, as you said, that we're flipping the narrative. The whole idea of this book is to flip the narrative. So even in the cover, we flip the narrative.
And folks, just so you see where this came from, Ericka, if you can put up the original propaganda poster from Nazi Germany from back in the day.
That's amazing.
There it is. That was my inspiration for the book cover. This was the Nazi, the arrogant Nazi overlooking the pathetic Jews as they were imagined. And I said to myself, we need to flip this. They did a good job creating propaganda.
Yep.
And it's a nice piece of art. And let's flip it on its head, because that's the idea here. Let's flip the narrative, and let's give Jews a sense of moral self-confidence and feel good about their greatness, so they can walk with their heads held high and realize that anti-Semitism should not bring us down. It should actually be a source of strength and inspiration. So I call this book an inspirational look at Jew hatred.
Ericka, you're in the feed?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you just can't see you. There you
Yeah,
are.
no, I was
So
I was leaving the men folk to talk.
Okay, I just don't want to dominate. I just don't want to dominate the conversation, because then you're going to give me
No.
all sorts of static later. Robert, you talk too much.
No, this is so fascinating. I love the way that you're framing this, Rabbi, because my husband Benjamin and I often talk about this. He's black, I'm a woman. I know it's hard to tell. But our affinity groups, if you will, or our, whatever our demographics, we're supposed to be victims and feel like victims. And people use that as currency. It's used as currency in our culture to be a victim somehow, to be victimized or, whatever. And this is even, not only are you saying we're not victims, you're saying like, this is proof that we're on the right track. This is something to be confident in. This is like, it's like, it's like confirmation that you're on the right track.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well said. And, in the end, the one who pulls the victim card, and you want to play that for a generation, 2 generations, who's hurt most by that? It's the one playing the victim card. Yeah.
The ones that are playing the card, that are playing the, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. They don't realize it. They might get some short-term gain, but they're actually missing out. And when the Jewish people, once again, because I think a better title for the Jewish people, better than startup nation, is resilient nation. When the Jewish people came out of the Holocaust and had to fight again for the state of Israel, we weren't telling anybody victim card. We just wanted to live a life. That's what we want. Let's just live a good life. Let's have Shabbat. Let's light those candles. Let's have families, because you know what? We benefit. Let's make a living so we can provide for our children and send them to university and get an education. Let's live our lives. And that's the greatest use of freedom. And that's the greatest benefit.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, Rabbi, because obviously I've seen several of your movies, I've seen Obsession. There's clearly a threat coming from what the world wants to call radical Islam. That's certainly open to a much broader conversation about Islam and Islamic values. But how does that fit into this in terms of worldview? Because it's the three, and I'm being magnanimous here. There are 3 great religions in the world. Certainly, Jerusalem is it's the intersect of those 3 great religions. How do you see and integrate Islam into this, what I would call, when I say greater warfare, I don't mean physical warfare, I mean spiritual.
Yeah. Well, first of all, again, you see, when you talk about the 3 great religions, you see again the impact of the Jewish people, because it was Abraham's immediate descendants who started, who were both responsible for Western civilization, Rome, Christianity, that came through his grandson Esau, and Ishmael, who was his son, was the father of the Islamic people, the Arab Islamic people. So the huge impact on the spiritual future of the Jewish people, not always for the good, but for the most part good, came directly from Abraham. But the answer to your question is that, as you said, I've been bringing awareness of the threat of radical Islam to the world. And for some reason, I've been able to listen. That's what I do. I think that's what I do more than most people. I listen. So the reason I was able to warn and tell people early on about the threat of radicalism and the ideology behind it was because I listened to them. I didn't put some blinders on my face. I didn't interpret their words and say, no, what they mean is this, and put my Western sensibilities onto their words. No, this is what they said. And the same thing in this book I do with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. I say, this is what he said. Don't make things up. Don't create a caricature of a nutty dictator who didn't know what he was talking about, who convinced the German people to do something they didn't know what he was talking about. I'm listening. And the fact is that it's one line, that the anti-Jewish sentiment that has gone throughout history has just continued. And in the book, I paint that how the radical Islamist world inherited Nazism and anti-Semitism from Hitler, the Mufti of Jerusalem, who was the
Grand
leader.
Mufti.
Yeah, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who was the leader of the Islamic world, he was the father of Palestinian nationalism. He moved to Germany in 1941 and spent the rest of the year in Berlin as an honored guest of Adolf Hitler. This is in my book. He had a meeting with Hitler where he said that quote that to him. He said, Hitler said to the Mufti, I want you to lock this in your heart, that this is a war against the Jews. Don't get fooled by everything else. And when we're done in Europe, we're going to come wipe out the Jews in the Middle East. And the Mufti said, you're my man. And he joined partners and he helped create a Muslim SS group. So interesting. Hitler hated Christianity, but he was fond of Islam. He didn't. So he understood that it's a bit of a different religion than Judaism and Christianity. That's fascinating too.
I'm sorry. This is driving me crazy. I can't even handle this. How? Okay. This
Ericka, you got to get back to the mic. You got to get back to the mic.
I can't handle it. I'm like, how can you hate the Jews when your religion was founded by Jews? Like, it's the same for Christianity. I've never understood that. I'm like, you follow, your Messiah is a Jew, dude. Like, what are you? And I understand Islam does not consider Jesus the Messiah and whatever. But if you follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then we're cousins, bro. How can you want to murder me?
Yeah, it's deep psychology. That's the answer, Ericka. It's deep psychology. Now, I will refer to also to something really fascinating that answers your question that's in my book, and it is about the famous author Fyodor Dostoevsky, who answered this question in an indirect way. He wrote a book called The Brothers Karamazov, and in that book, he brings us back to the Inquisition in the Middle Ages, where 300 years of killing Jews in the name of Christianity, right? And the Grand Inquisitor, the one who's leading it all, one day gets a visitor. The visitor is Jesus himself, comes back to visit.
Oh, wow.
Comes back, and he comes and he reappears on the scene. And you would think that the Grand Inquisitor would say, hello, welcome. Don't you think I'm doing a great job? And instead, you know what he does?
What?
He imprisons Jesus. He says, Jesus, as you can see, we're not doing what you told us to do. We're actually a dictatorship in the name of religion, right? What you asked of humanity was way too much. You asked for everybody to be fully responsible, to be morally responsible, to live up to the potential of a human being, of a soul and a body, and being responsible. You asked way too much. You're guilty. You're guilty. And we're going to imprison you. Get lost. Let us do our dictatorship in the name of religion here. Get out of here. Is that fascinating? So he's cutting to the chase that even when you're working in the name of religion, it doesn't mean you're being fully godly. And that body-soul conflict is still there. And he represented that. So that's really the push and pull. And the Jewish people, and just because you're Christian, just because you're Jewish, doesn't mean you're righteous. You have to do it. You have to really do it. You get a little assistance from a good system and some good wisdom, but you still, in the end of the day, you got to use your free will and be a good person. And that's not easy on a day-to-day basis. And that not easiness it'd be easier to be freed from that burden. The human part of the human being wants to be freed from that burden. And when you want to be freed from that burden and you're a dictator, you say, can we do something with the Jews? Can we get rid of the Jews?
Yeah.
Because they're bothering me.
That is, I think, when you were describing some of these things, like Hitler doesn't want the Jews carrying this message, and it just, the straight and narrow path is not easy, right? And that is what, as believers, Jews or Christians particularly, we have a very specific set of expectations we're expected to live up to, and and it can be a challenge. It is much easier to just give into your desires, to give into the flesh, and just do whatever you want. The problem is it doesn't usually end well. Your life doesn't normally go well. It doesn't provide for maximum human flourishing.
Right. And really, that's what
Rabbi,
it's about. No.
In the time we have left, I have what to me is a seminal question. And I think your work is prolific and far-reaching, and you've had 150 million people, see the different movies and things. So your reach is incomparable. What I've always asked people, though, is facts are one thing. How do you move hearts and minds? Because in my estimation, until we can change hearts and minds, because as I've said, and again, I want to also, and I was actually remiss, I wanted to thank you for being also one of the featured speakers in Israel Appreciation Day, which was our event last September as well. Very important piece. And the reason I bring it up is what we're trying to do is move hearts and minds. And how do you do that? Right? You can give them the facts. and I think your perspective, certainly through Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew, is absolutely groundbreaking in terms of its thought leadership, in terms of trying to sort of reestablish the internal spiritual rudder for people, right? But how do you get to hearts and minds? Because just Jews supporting Jews doesn't move the needle anymore.
Right.
How do you reach hearts and minds?
So I think it's a great question, and I think in the end of the day, I'm an eternal optimist. I don't know where it comes from. I think it is a Jewish trait, but I think that, as I said, human beings are made up of a soul and body, and I think ultimately, like Ericka was just saying, is that it works better. Being an upright spiritual human being works better, and when you speak in that language of spirituality, of meaning, of goodness, of connection, ultimately that lifts people. And you're right, it's a struggle. The Jewish people have been struggling with exactly this issue for 3,000 years. It's not easy, and you're right, it doesn't go by facts. But we just got to keep going one day at a time and trying to inspire people. At the end of my book, I go to 15 different stories. I just tell stories of people who have faced hatred, faced the anti-Semitism, Jews and non-Jews, and they responded with spiritual and moral grace, dignity, and strength. And they became more Jewish. They became pro-Israel. They stood up to the evil, and they feel good about it. And when you feel good about it, so I think it's about the inspiration of it all. And I think we have to really always just focus on that positive side of the story, which is why I feel, Jews, we spend too much time talking about anti-Semitism. Let's talk the positive side of our story. Let's inspire ourselves and the world together to help bring the world to what the purpose is. And I'm confident it will, because we've seen, Ericka knows the prophecies, the prophecies. We've seen all the prophecies fulfilled already. We know the plot line. We know where it's going. It's going to end good. It's just a bumpy road to get there.
I love that. That is, I love that you just that just tickled me so much. I don't even know what to say. But you're right. And that's like, Ben, like, I don't want to talk about the fact that that black people were just slaves. Black people were more than just slaves. There's more to Jewish people than the Holocaust. Like, yeah. I think it's
for your own sake, move on.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Exactly. Again, not that we should ever forget, because never forget, but there's more to the Jewish people, and I would love to see that really flourish and be celebrated more than being a victim.
Agreed.
No,
Agreed.
Rabbi, cannot thank you enough for joining us on the show. Truly an inspiration. Ericka, can we pull up the book cover again, please?
Yes.
Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew? Available everywhere. And
Yes.
it is not about anti-Semitism, as the rabbi has said. It is about understanding faith and religion and reestablishing what it is to be, well, I'll use the word, pious and righteous, and it's just a powerful book.
Yeah.
Rabbi, I cannot thank you enough to joining
Thank
us
you
on Other
very
People.
much.
And again, thank you for being part of Israel Appreciation Day as well last September.
Yes.
My pleasure. Keep up the good work, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thanks
We'd
for
love to
being
have
here.
you back again as your time allows.
My pleasure.